Hey gang, so for the past couple months I've been posting lots of tutorials on how to perform some of my favorite antibrids. Today's video is going to be all about pendulum versus cateye. That's this move right here. And next week we're going to talk a little bit about finding transition points between different antibrids. But this is one of those moves that is kind of a go-to when I don't really know what I'm going to do next in terms of antibrids. The reason for this just is that it passes through a lot of different positions that are very useful for getting to other antibrids, whether it be Cateye versus isolation, whether it be triquetra versus pendulum, whether it be pendulum versus cap, like so. It's just a really useful antibrid to have under your belt. And plus, which it looks really cool. As it's moving back and forth like this, that kind of nice little illusion that it does where the two poi heads are sticking together is actually really helpful. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what we can do about that. So if you haven't already, please watch one of my many videos now on how to perform cateyes, because clearly with a cateye versus pendulum is going to be relatively important for getting this move down. The other part of it, however, has to do with the pendulum, and this is the first time that we've really had to deal with an isolated pendulum. Normal pendulums, yes, we've done them in spades, but how to do an isolated pendulum is a little bit more difficult. Essentially, your hand is still performing the same kind of circle that is a poise with the cross, just like it does in an isolation. But this time, instead of trying to keep the tether taut the entire time, now you're trying to keep the poi head beneath your hand, like so. How this is done is basically, you want to kind of imagine that you're going to be picking up the tether and then bringing your head above it and dropping the tether down. Picking the tether up, hand above it, dropping the tether down. Going back and forth like this. One of the ways I actually kind of like to think of this is being that the hand and the poi head are kind of at opposite ends of circles that are piled right on top of each other. If I've got a circle here and a circle here, what I'm going to wind up doing is that poi head is always going to be at the point across the bottom circle that's opposite to the point on the top circle where my hand is at any given point, right? Now this basically means that my hand and poi are trying to displace each other always horizontally in a lot of respects. If my hand is going to the right, my poi is going to the left, so on and so forth, right? It's a little tricky to get it down at first, and it's really easy to forget and kind of fall back into this, this pendulum feel right here. But the more you drill that back and forth feeling, the easier it'll make the next few steps for you. So this clearly is not a poi, but it is helpful for getting down this trick. The reason being that our hands are always going to be this far away from each other. And in pushing one end, we are really pushing the other end as well. Yeah? So think of it this way, that my left hand is going to be the one that does the pendulum. And as I'm picking it up, my right hand is getting kind of pulled along to the midpoint with it. And as my left hand is going to go over to my right hand side, my right hand is going to wind up crossed underneath it, pointing here to my right. And now, as I push them both down, my right hand is going to wind up under my left hand, and we're going to come back to where we started, thinking that the left hand is always going to be the hand that's above. And we're kind of cranking back and forth. One way you could think of this as being that we're essentially going kind of back and forth like this, and we're just moving the staff up and down as we're doing that, right? Like so. One thing that's really important is to find this cross position right here on the way down, where I've got my left hand over to my left side, my right hand over to my left side, like so. The reason being that this is what preserves that isolation-y feeling as you're coming back down on the other side, right? So with all that in mind, let's try putting the two poi together, right? So this is going to start off with the two poi penduluming back and forth, just as though we were going to do isolation versus cateye, right? Except what we're going to do instead this time is, rather than having that point of contact and the right hand go over, we're instead going to have that point of contact, and it's going to be the left hand that goes up and over, right? So imagine almost like you're trying to get your left hand up towards the ceiling and back down and around past your right shoulder, yeah? Up and over towards the ceiling, down past your right shoulder. This will give you the top part of the move. The bottom part of the move actually is almost the exact same thing as what we find with isolation versus cateye, like so. So think of it as being that, imagine like almost if you're performing isolation versus cateye, that moment when the two poi are kind of horizontal here on their way up, that the big difference is that rather than letting that left hand or whichever hand you have doing the isolation go back down towards the floor, you're instead going to let it pop up towards the ceiling each time. And, you can even alternate back and forth between them if it helps get the move down. Thinking that left hand goes down, left hand goes up. Left hand goes down, left hand goes up. Otherwise, the midpoints of the move are exactly the same. We are still looking for positions where we have the poi kind of horizontal on either side of the body, whether it happens to be with the hands on native sides or whether it happens to be with the hands on non-native sides, crossed over, like so, right? Now, for completeness sake, there is another variation on this that involves having the hands together rather than the hands apart as they would be in an antibrid. This version is not an antibrid. It's really, really funky looking though, and the timing is really counterintuitive. Now, normally when we're performing pendulum versus cateye in this orientation right here, we're doing it in such a way that we wind up having the two poi heads pointed to opposite sides whenever we're coming through that middle part, right? For this one, it's the opposite. It's going to be the hands and the poi heads, both of the hands on one side, both of the poi heads on the other side, right? It's also really funky because when we were performing pendulum versus cateye in this kind of arrangement right here is the antibrid, it means that the isolated pendulum right here has the hand going across the top part of the cateye. In this variation on it, it's going across, the poi head is going across the bottom part of the cateye, and we never really have any kind of overlap where the isolated pendulum hand is reaching the top part of the cateye. The top part of the cateye is basically bare up here, right? So to start getting this down, try having your two poi moving in together same. And I do this with both my hands over to the left-hand side. And as they come up to my right shoulder, I'm going to drop them down and around to get both of my hands over to my right-hand side and my poi heads over here to my left-hand side. From here, it's super weird and it's super tricky, but basically you want to get those two poi heads pointing over to your left-hand side, and when that happens, boom, right hand goes up and over in that same little cateye kind of formation that we're used to, but the left-hand poi has to stay down below your hand, right? So together it winds up being, we drop both of them down and around, and then that right-hand poi pops up and over when both of the poi heads are off to the other side, right? And the cool thing about this, the way that works, is that there's definitely a moment where going over the top, the two poi appear to be moving in kind of split opposites, right? As it would be right there, which, could conceivably make for a transition point. This also is a really, really, really awkward hybrid. So getting in and out of it from split opposites, not as easy, unfortunately. Awesome, guys. So next time I'm going to come around and tie all of this together with a lovely little bow and show you all the different transitions, or many of the different transitions that exist between many of these antibrids that I'm such a big fan of. So for everybody who's been tuning in these past couple months as I've been putting out these tutorials, thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with more for you next week. Peace. A huge thank you to Third Earth Fireproof for sponsoring this month's videos. Based in the heart of Brooklyn and made in America, Third Earth is an innovative clothing line that features fire retardant, all-natural fabrics, and high-quality craftsmanship, all with the fire performer in mind. Whether it be festival wear, costumes, or even everyday wear, Third Earth has an option that's right for you. Find them on Etsy and use the promo code DrexFactor to get 10% off your order. Also, a huge debt of thanks is owed to my Patreon supporters. If you or anybody that you know has learned something from one of the videos that I've put out, please consider signing up to make a monthly contribution. You'll get access to some great behind-the-scenes footage as well as great rewards. You can find me over at patreon.com/DrexFactorPoi. Thank you in advance.